Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. Right, so Act 7 has been very fun, but there are definitely some champions that do better than others, and therefore in today's video we're gonna go over my top 10 MVPs. But if I'm 100% honest, there is a quite big gap from, let's say, spot 6 from spot 4 to first, because those first 4 champions ended up doing more than half of the fights and all the other champions ended up doing significantly less. So if you're being brutally honest, this video should have been my 4 MVPs of 7.2. However, then again, obviously that wouldn't make for a very compelling video, and on top of that, I did felt the need to shout out several more champions. Now, it is very important for you guys to remember that this is my MVPs. It is who I used. It's not that who I claim to be the best for everything, so on and so forth. It obviously entirely depends on the mastery setups that I end up running. It depends on whatever champions I have ranked up on my account, and so on and so forth. So this is the champions that helped me the most in 7.2. And there are definitely a lot of champions that were situationally extremely amazing, like Angela, like Magneto. I could have probably used him more, but it's just that he doesn't have my very I don't know, preferable playstyle. I use him when I have to, but not because I want to, if that makes sense. Colossus was extremely cool for a few lanes. So there are a lot of champions that I could shout out, but let's start with spot number 10. And spot number 10 actually went to Dr. Doom because, number one, I was using Suicide Masteries. Therefore, it is not the easiest thing to use Dr. Doom with Suicide Masteries active. So I didn't use him as much as I could have potentially. But objectively looking at a piece of content, there weren't even that many more places where I would have really wanted to use the guy. But he still put in quite a lot of work for me on the lanes that were obviously designed for Mystic champions, on a couple of bosses. He was also a very good kind of like relatively cheesy option for that Armored Assault Mixmaster lane in the 726. So Dr. Doom definitely deserves a shout. He is, as always, impressive in every piece of content, and that was no exception here. Champion that did better for me than Doom in 7.2 actually was Black Widow Clairvoyant, and that kind of comes down to the fact that there are a lot of nodes that work around different types of debuffs, whether they are bleed debuffs, whether they are poison debuffs, whether they are incinerate debuffs. And there are at least like 5-6 lanes where one of these vulnerability lanes are active. And one of the coolest things about Black Widow Clairvoyant is that she has very easy access to poison, bleed, incinerate. And all of those nodes increase your attack if opponent has the debuff placed on them, regardless of how strong it is. So Black Widow Clairvoyant basically just start the fight, drop a heavy attack, and you have 200% attack bonus. On top of that, obviously, as a Mystic champion, she also performed better for me than Dr. Doom did because I was running Suicide Masteries. So I was using her a lot more than I did use Dr. Doom, not just because of my mastery setup, but also huge important role went to the fact that she has access to all of these different types of damage over time effects, and that was super helpful. So definitely very great champion there. Kingpin was one of the unexpected standouts there. I could have actually placed him higher, so currently I placed him like number 7, but really number 10 to number 5 is relatively close. And Kingpin is one of those champions that is a very great cheese option for all of these energy adoption nodes, where if you get a lot of tiny debuffs placed on him, he gains a ton of huge fury buffs from his overpower mode, and he just dishes out a ton of damage. On top of that, he manages to heal throughout most of the fights. And the coolest thing is, you don't need to run Hood Synergy with him on these lanes, because as soon as you have 8 debuffs, you purify all of them, regardless whether they are rages or they are regular debuffs. So long as you keep getting your debuffs placed on you in a very steady rate, it doesn't matter that 40% of those incinerates and cold snaps actually land on you and stay there for a brief moment, because they're not that potent, and it still works out extremely well for Kingpin in general. And obviously there is a lane for XL champions where he was quite helpful as well. And all in all, definitely impressed me, and he's quite likely to be one of my next rank 3 champions, to be honest. Right, Nick Fury, as always, ever so impressive. There's plenty of bleed vulnerability lanes. His ability to bypass miss, evade, and shrug up debuffs also came in handy. And not to mention his synergy with Deadpools, where you can, well, basically heal up if you're running Suicide Masteries. That came in quite clutch as well. So Nick Fury wasn't quite the star of the show, but he definitely more than pulled his own weight. I'm not going to spend too much time discussing that. We need to move on. Hulkbuster was one of my surprise champions because he happened to fit quite a lot of requirements. Once again, he has access to shock, so he can benefit from stuff like shock vulnerability. He can get several armor buffs, so there were a couple of tech nodes that kind of helped him as well along the way. There was an extra large champion lane where he played a wonderful second fiddle to Immortal Hulk, and in general, just he's a great matchup for Havocs, for instance, and yeah, he did surprisingly well for me. Oh, on top of that, his stun on level 1, guaranteed stun, enabled me to cheese a couple of more lanes. And yeah, Hulkbuster, quite surprisingly, I did not expect this, but was one of the champions that was on my team more often than not. So I kind of feel better than ever about having ranked up my Hulkbuster. And somehow, for whatever reason, he was one of my best options against Grandmaster boss as well. Partially because in longer fights he can very easily heal from Suicide Masteries because he gains 25% poison resistance, poison and bleed resistance, I believe. Yeah, incoming. One second. Here we go. Incoming bleed and poison debuff suffer 25% potency, and it gets updated per his active stacks of armor. So basically, as soon as you hit 2 armor buffs, you get 50% less poison damage from Liquid Courage Mastery, and he effectively works like a mini Deadpool, mini Angela. So that is super helpful too. Right, let's move on. Human Torch. Now, Human Torch I might have used slightly more if I was not running Suicide Masteries, but I was helping him out quite a lot with that Nick Fury synergy I mentioned before. And in general, he definitely did quite a lot of great work. The fact that he could access a lot of debuffs relying only on his basic combos was super helpful. He is a great option for several of the bosses, like Tigra, like Magnetos, either one of them. So yeah, he definitely once again proved his worth in current meta. As we are getting more and more champions that have access to energy damage, his value kind of raises more and more as well. Great option for Dragon Man boss too. So yeah, definitely very, very worthy champion. However, now we're going to move on to top 4. And these top 4 were on my team and helping me vast majority of the time. It's actually very rare that so few champions can put in so much work in a single piece of content such as this. So let's start with spot number 4. And this is a champion that I would actually like to put on higher, but I need to be fair here. Immortal Hulk. For whatever reason, and it is slightly suspicious, but he was amazing. There were a handful of lanes where he was by far the best option, and in a lot of other scenarios, he just nuked down any fights that could potentially be tricky. That was exactly kind of my approach to things, where if I looked at the fight and it was seeming quite bothersome, then I just brought in Immortal Hulk with all the different damage attack modifiers, stun vulnerabilities, and whatever else we have going on with flare nodes. I could bring in Immortal Hulk for pretty much any fight or any couple of fights on a lane. Keeping in mind that there are only 6 fights, that's more than enough of a reason to bring him in. If I can use him on 2 fights, he's more than covered his worth on a team. And the idea was just to go in a fight, get to level 2, and nuke down the opponent. And then, as a rank 3 6-star on Suicides, even without boosts, he could quite easily just nuke any opponent with a single level 2. So he did a lot of work on me, and he's definitely the champion that put on the biggest smile on my face. Man, I ranked him up partially as a joke, partially because I really like him as a champion, but I never expected to have this much return of that champion. He's a champion that I actually quite frequently use in Alliance Quest right now. He's a champion that I absolutely love casually questing with. And he has more than proved himself in harder piece of content now as well. So I absolutely love Immortal Hulk. Such a cool character. Still think he should get tweaked. I still think rage timer should be increased slightly. Immortality cooldown should be reduced a bit, and a few other things. But man, I enjoy using the guy so much, and he does a great amount of job. Right. Archangel was definitely the mutant class MVP. For several of the lanes, I actually brought in 2 Archangels. And that's partially because I was running Suicide Masteries, and because Archangel was by far the best option. We have had several bleed vulnerability lanes, poison vulnerability lanes, stun vulnerability, heavy assault. All that stuff helped Archangel go from insanely useful to bananas crazy. And you can just breeze through lanes with Archangel. I once again was using my 6-star rank 3 alongside my 5-star rank 5 and just demolishing things. He was extremely useful for multitude of bosses as well. So that was super encouraging, and overall, definitely one of my top 3 MVPs. He was competing extremely closely with Moleman, who just happened to fit a ton of needs that were there. His true accuracy gave him a huge leg up on many champions because evade effects were kind of like one of the main themes of the, let's say, problem presented for the players. So Moleman could work with all of that stuff, ignoring ignoring evades, ignoring auto blocks, and then just the guaranteed crits with all of the damage increase multipliers, with the bleed vulnerabilities, with flare nodes, with stun vulnerabilities, with foresights, with all the other stuff, gives already his very impressive damage even crazier damage output. And yeah, he was on my team pretty much for most of the lanes. Such a great champion, made insanely amazing for this piece of content. One of the champions that's most fun and effective, kind of in a sense, especially here. So yes, absolutely love using Moleman, and MVP hands down is gonna go here to Ghost. They just didn't ghost proof this chapter at all. With all of the attack multiplier lanes, with all of the energy adoption lanes, it was a ghost fiesta. Really, I didn't use ghost as much as I should have, where I purposely chose to use different champions where ghost would have been the best option just to mess about, just because the piece of content was so fun. But objectively, more than half of the lanes in this quest can be ghosted. I think in 7.21, 5 out of 6 lanes, Ghost is the best answer. As simple as that. In 7.21, we have double energy adoption lane, Ghost. We have Tyranny Power Shield node, Ghost. We have Clawback Flail node, Ghost, because Flail puts on a ton of debuffs. Then we had Foresight node, Ghost. Flare node, Ghost. Just so much of it. Honestly, Ghost by far the biggest MVP in 7.2. And anybody who's focusing on Legends run, invest everything in your Ghost at this point, because yeah, she's going unchecked. And that is about it. Now, obviously, again, I didn't shout out every champion that I used. Colossus, Magneto were occasionally useful. Quake is still extremely capable, but I hardly ever used Quake. But not because she couldn't do the fights, because I didn't want to use Quake, if that makes sense. Because the fights would have been longer, and this piece of content doesn't require it. So, in general, yes, absolutely loved 7.2, and these are my MVPs. So let's go with spot number 1, Ghost. Spot number 2, Moleman. 3, Archangel. 4, Immortal Hulk. 5, Human Torch. 6, Hulkbuster. 7, Nick Fury. 8, Kingpin. 9, Black Widow Clairvoyant. 10, Doom. And again, the order might not be strictly accurate for 10th to 4th place or so. Top 4, I kind of was quite careful assorting them. But yeah, let me know what were your MVPs after all. This is just an opinion, and yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and I'm gonna catch you guys soon. See ya! Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information